Ever feel like you need a secret decoder ring or something to figure out online security?
It can definitely feel that way sometimes.
Right. So today we're basically handing you one. We're diving into the world of hacking with Hacking for Dummies. Third edition, it's like your guidebook to thinking like, a digital ninja, but the good kind, obviously.
And this book is a great place to start, actually.
Yeah.
It takes all these crazy technical concepts and breaks them down so anyone can understand them. You don't have to be a tech wizard.
Exactly. It's not about actually becoming a hacker, right? More like learning the moves of a master thief so you can protect your own valuables. We're talking about figuring out those vulnerabilities before the bad guys do.
You got it. And one of the big things the book really drives home is like understanding why hackers do what they do. Not just how they do it, but the why behind it.
So, like, why do they do it? What's the motivation? Is it all just for kicks?
Sometimes, yeah. But it can be a lot more complicated than that. I mean, you've got financial gain, activism, espionage, even just the thrill of the challenge. And the book does a cool job of diving into all those different angles.
Okay, that makes sense. Different hackers, different motives. But get this, the book talks about how sometimes the easiest way in isn't through some crazy code or whatever, it's us. Like, they call it social engineering, and it just freaks me out how simple it can be.
It's true. It's often easier to trick someone into just giving up their password than to, hack into a system.
So it's all about manipulation, basically, like playing on people's trust or fear to get what they want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a story in the book about this security expert.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy's a pro. And even he fell for a social engineering trick. He forgot his password or something and ended up telling tech support enough info that they just, reset it for him.
See, that's what's scary. If it can happen to an expert, it can happen to any of us. Okay, so what are some of the most common tactics they use?
Well, one that's surprisingly common is shoulder surfing. Just literally looking over your shoulder at a coffee shop, in the office, whatever, to steal your password as you type it in.
Are you kidding me? No way, that's it. I'm never typing in my password at a coffee shop again.
Probably a good call. Then there's phishing, which everyone's probably heard of by now. Those official-looking emails that try to get you to click a bad link or give up your info.
Oh, like those ones that say your Amazon account has been compromised and you need to update your payment info.
Exactly. So, yeah, understanding this whole social engineering thing is just as important as the tech side, for sure.
Okay, so we've covered the human element, which is scary enough on its own. But let's get into the actual tech stuff networks. I always think of those hacker movies with, the frantic typing and breaking into systems. Is it actually like that?
Well, movies definitely exaggerate a bit for, dramatic effect.
Yeah.
But the core ideas, those are accurate. Network security is a huge part of ethical hacking. And the book talks about some of the tools they use to test and secure those networks.
Like what? Give me some examples. What kind of tools are we talking about?
Okay, so there are things like Superscan and Langard, which sounds super intense.
I was going to say those names.
Right. But they're actually super important for ethical hackers. They help with stuff like ping sweeps and port scanning, which might sound complicated, but they're basically just ways of mapping out a network and finding weaknesses.
So it's kind of like scouting out a building before you try to break in. You got to know the layout, the weak points, all that.
Exactly. And you'd be surprised how often the weak point isn't some crazy code. It's something simple, like a misconfigured firewall or, just outdated software.
Wait, you're telling me a firewall is that important? I always just click through those warnings.
Huge. I mean, a firewall's like your first line of defense, right?
Right.
It controls what can get in and out of your network. Imagine just leaving your front door wide open. That's basically what a misconfigured firewall is.
Okay. Point taken, firewalls are important. But what about passwords? I mean, those stories about people getting their passwords hacked, that's the stuff that keeps me up at night.
And for good reason, honestly. Passwords are like the weakest link a lot of the time. We use them for everything, but most people aren't exactly creating Fort Knox level passwords.
Yeah, no, guilty as charged. I use the same password for multiple accounts because it's just easier to remember.
I get it, but that's like using the same key for your house, your car, and your office. If someone gets that one key, they've got access to everything.
Okay, yeah, that's a good way to put it. So strong passwords, different for every account, got it. But how do they even crack those things anyway? Is it just random guessing?
Not quite. They've got tools for that, serious ones. Cain and Abel, PWDUM3, John the Ripper is like their own little hacking toolkit.
Those names, though, it's like something out of a movie.
Right. And then you've got rainbow tables. these huge databases of pre-computed hashes, which basically makes cracking common passwords crazy fast.
Hold on, hashes. What are those again?
It's basically a way to turn your password into like this jumbled mess of characters so it's not stored as plain text. But with these rainbow tables, hackers can like reverse engineer them and figure out your actual password.
So even if it's hidden, they can still find it. That's kind of terrifying.
Yep, which is why those strong, unique passwords are so important. And if you can, turn on two-factor authentication for your accounts.
Right, two-factor authentication. I've heard of that, but honestly, it seems like kind of a pain.
It's an extra step, I get it. But trust me, it's worth it. It's like an extra layer of security. You need your password A&D, a code from your phone or email to get in. So even if someone gets your password, they're still locked out.
Okay, that makes sense. You've convinced me. Two-factor authentication it is. You know what else worries me, though? Websites. It seems like every other day there's a new data breach.
And it's a valid concern. Websites, especially the ones that deal with, like credit card info and personal data, those are prime targets.
So how do they do it? How do you even break into a website?
There are a bunch of ways, but one of the most common is through something called SQL injection.
SQL injection. Sounds intense and technical.
It is, a little.
Yeah.
But basically, hackers find weaknesses in the website's code and use them to inject their own commands. It's like sneaking a secret message into a letter that wasn't meant for you.
And that lets them do what exactly?
Oh, all sorts of things. They can get past security, access sensitive data, even take over the whole website sometimes.
No way. Seriously, that's wild. And I bet it happens more often than we realize, right?
You're right. It's way more common than people think. The book has some pretty crazy examples, actually.
So what can we do, both as people who use websites and just, everyday people trying to survive online? How do we protect ourselves?
Well, first off, be smart about which websites you visit. And don't just click any link you see. If something looks sketchy, it probably is. And be careful about giving out your info unless you're 100% sure it's legit.
So basically, if a website looks like it was designed in the 90s, don't enter your credit card info.
Pretty much. And seriously, keep your software updated, especially your web browser. Those updates come with security patches that fix those weak spots hackers love. It's like basic digital hygiene.
Okay, that makes sense. Update, update, update. But what about the more proactive stuff? The book mentions some tools hackers use to actually, test websites for vulnerabilities.
Right. It talks about things like HT-Track, which can download a whole website so hackers can see how it's built and find those weak spots.
So it's like getting a behind-the-scenes look at the website's blueprints to see where you could break in.
Exactly. And believe it or not, even Google can be a powerful tool for hackers. There are these special search operators they can use to find hidden stuff, sensitive info, even vulnerabilities in the code.
Wow, I never thought of Google as a hacking tool, but it makes sense. It's all about knowing how to use the information that's out there, right?
Exactly. And that's the key takeaway here. Knowledge is power. The more you know about how hackers think, the better you can protect yourself.
I totally agree. This has been eye-opening for sure. But I'm not going to lie, I'm also feeling a little overwhelmed. There's just so much to think about, so many ways things can go wrong.
I hear you. It can definitely feel like a lot, especially when you're first getting into the world of cybersecurity.
So where do we go from here? What are the most important things to focus on? I need a game plan.
That's a great question, and it's actually something the book talks about. It goes beyond just showing you the threats and gives you real advice on how to protect yourself and your devices.
Okay, so it's like a cybersecurity survival guide. Give me the highlights. What are the essentials?
There are a few key things it breaks down, but one of the biggest is patching.
Patching, you mean like those annoying software updates I always seem to be closing?
Those are the ones. It might seem like a pain, but keeping your software updated is so crucial.
I know, but what's the big deal? Why are those updates so important?
They usually have security fixes for those vulnerabilities hackers love to exploit. It's like checking the locks on your doors and windows to make sure they're still working.
Okay, that makes sense. So don't ignore those update notifications.
Exactly. Think of it as part of your digital hygiene routine. Along with patching, strong passwords are a must-have, obviously.
We already covered that one, but yeah, it's worth repeating. Strong, unique passwords for everything.
You got it. And honestly, don't underestimate the power of a good password manager.
Okay, we haven't really gotten into those yet. Tell me more. Are they really worth it?
Totally. Think of it like a digital vault for all your passwords. It keeps them safe, generates super strong ones for you, and even helps you remember them. which is a lifesaver.
That does sound pretty amazing, especially since I can never remember those complicated passwords anyway.
Exactly. It takes the pressure off you and makes you way more secure. It's a win-win.
Sold. I'm convinced. What else? What other cybersecurity wisdom does Hacking for Dummies have for us?
Well, it talks a lot about the importance of just being aware.
Yeah.
Technology is only part of the solution. We need to be smart about what we do online, avoid clicking on sketchy links, be careful about what we share, that kind of thing.
So it's not just about the tech itself, it's about being smart and aware of your surroundings.
Exactly. And the book talks about how important training and awareness programs are, not just for tech people, but for everyone.
Right, because at the end of the day, we're all potential targets.
Exactly. Cybersecurity is a team effort. We've all got to do our part to stay safe.
This has been quite the crash course in hacking. Super interesting, but I'm not going to lie, a little intimidating too.
I get it. It can feel that way. But remember, knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
Just by understanding how hackers operate, you're already one step ahead.
That's a good point. So we've covered a lot: social engineering, network weaknesses, password security, website exploits. Is there anything else people should be thinking about? What about the bigger picture?
One thing to remember is that the cybersecurity world is always changing. What's considered secure today might not be tomorrow.
That's a good point. This book was published back in 2010, so I'm curious what new threats have popped up since then.
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
And definitely one we should talk about.
So are we ready to talk about the future of hacking then? What's changed since our Hacking for Dummies book came out back in 2010?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just how much bigger and more sophisticated the attacks have gotten. I mean, think about how many more devices are connected to the internet now compared to back then. It's billions more.
Yeah.
And those are all potential ways in for hackers.
Right. It's like that whole Internet of Things thing, right?
Yeah.
Smart refrigerators, security cameras, even toasters these days. It's kind of crazy.
It really is.
Yeah.
And all those devices mean tons of data, too. Personal info, financial records, you name it. And if that data falls into the wrong hands, well, you can imagine.
More devices, more data, more problems. That's not exactly reassuring. So what else is new in the world of digital crime? What new tricks have these guys come up with?
One thing we're seeing a lot more of is ransomware attacks, basically. They hold your data hostage until you pay up.
It's like digital kidnapping. I've heard some scary stories about hospitals and companies getting hit with that stuff.
And it's not just big organizations either. Regular people are getting targeted too, which is pretty scary.
So what can we even do about it? It feels kind of overwhelming, to be honest.
It's definitely a challenge, but it's not hopeless. One of the best things we can do is just stay informed, know what the threats are and how they're evolving.
Easier said than done, right? How do we even keep up with all that?
It can be a lot, but there are some good resources out there. Websites like Krebs on security, Threat Post, they're great for staying up to date on all the latest cybersecurity news.
Okay, so bookmark those. What else? This all sounds pretty intense, especially for those of us who aren't exactly tech experts.
Right, and for just the basics, honestly, one of the best things you can do is enable two-factor authentication on everything. Every account that offers it, use it.
We talked about that earlier, but yeah, it's important enough to mention again.
Totally. It adds that extra layer of security that can make a huge difference. And of course, just be careful out there. Don't click on suspicious links. Be wary of weird attachments. Think before you share personal info online. You know the drill.
Be careful what you click. Be careful what you share. It's like the digital age motto.
Pretty much. And remember, cybersecurity isn't just about the tech. It's about people, too.
There's that human element again. We always come back to that, don't we?
It's unavoidable.
Yeah.
Hackers are always going to look for the easiest way in, and a lot of times that means taking advantage of, human error, carelessness, trust, fear.
So it's not enough to have strong passwords and firewall. We've got to be smart about how we behave online, too.
Exactly. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and don't be afraid to ask for help if you're not sure about something. That's what security experts are for, right?
Right. Well, on that note, thanks so much for guiding us through this whole hacking deep dive. This has been super fascinating, even if it was a little scary at times.
It's been my pleasure, really. And like we've been saying, knowledge is power. The more you know about this stuff, the safer you'll be.
Well said. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us, everyone. And remember, stay curious, stay safe, and stay one step ahead.